and economic justice. Crystal Walthall of Faith in New York. Rabbi Rachel Timner of Congregation Beth Elohim. And I also want to recognize our borough president, Antonio Reynoso, is here with us this morning, accompanied by his deputy borough president, Reverend Kim Council. I want to recognize Women's Empowerment Coalition of New York City, New York Jewish Agenda, Bishop David Butler from Fullness of Joy Ministries, Ernest Flowers of the Seventh-day Adventists, Reverend Dr. Rashad Raymond Moore from the First Baptist Church of Crown Heights, Pastor Femi Akojeni from Life Zone Church, Imam Sheikh Safraz Bacchus, Pastor Emil Washington from Pilgrim Church Assemblies, Judson Memorial Church, Reverend Boyce from St. Gabriel's Episcopal Church, Reverend Kermit Morris of Mother AME Zion Church and the National Action Network, and Shelley Brasley, Commissioner of Social Action Ministry for the Church of God in Christ, representing Bishop Frank Anthony White. Thank you all for being here with us today. I also want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Lincoln Ressler. Today, we are standing together as a united front, council members, faith leaders, advocates, and directly impacted families to send a clear message that New Yorkers need and deserve transparency. In December, the council passed the How Many Stops Act with a veto-proof majority because we understand that transparency and accountability are pivotal to establishing the trust that is necessary to make our communities safer. Intro 586 of the How Many Stops Act, which the mayor vetoed on Friday, came out of the remedial process that resulted from the 2014 federal court decision that determined that the NYPD's use of stop and frisk to be unconstitutional. Black and Latino communities most impacted by stop and frisk gave input about the transparency needed for level 1 and 2 stops. That is the origin of this bill. Feedback from impacted communities and families, mothers, fathers, daughters, and sons, teachers, healthcare workers, and other essential workers who were stopped and today are still being stopped. The federal court-appointed monitor from that decision has found 1 out of every 4 stops made by the mayor's newly reconstituted police unit to be unconstitutional. Despite being less than half of the city's population, Black and Latino New Yorkers make up 97% of those stopped on a daily basis. The federal monitor and NYPD's own audits have also shown the department to persistently underreport stops. A recently released report from the Civilian Complaint Review Board revealed that NYPD misconduct complaints rose 51% last year to their highest level in over a decade. That's very serious. Let's be clear. All New Yorkers deserve to feel and deserve to be safe. All of us share one goal, and that is to ensure that our neighborhoods are safer and that we all have equitable access to public safety. Our legislation will help us achieve that goal by expanding transparency and equipping the city with the necessary data to make smarter decisions about how to make our neighborhoods safer. Too often, our communities are only offered more policing and criminal justice approaches as standalone responses. Our communities deserve more and comprehensive safety solutions that make us safer. By leaving our neighborhoods under-equipped, it allows for cycles of violence to continue unchecked in our communities, harm that is passed down to our children and to our future generations. That's why our council has pursued a different and more holistic path to safety, and all of the above approach that recognizes communities are safer when we comprehensively invest in a broader set of solutions. Today, we will hear from interfaith leaders and advocates who will speak about what they have seen and experienced on the ground in their communities and the importance of transparency. They know, as so many of my colleagues know, that our Black and Latino communities bear the overwhelming brunt of police stops that intrude into people's daily lives. The disproportionate impact of these stops is not casual interactions, as the mayor and his administration claim, and they take a collective toll on communities and on New Yorkers. No one is left unscathed. They have a ripple effect that deteriorates the trust needed to make our communities safer. This moment demands moral clarity and courage from all of us to demand better for our neighborhoods, our loved ones, and for all New Yorkers. We cannot settle for the status quo because the status quo has failed Black and Latino New Yorkers and other communities of color time and time again. The choice is clear. We must work to end the legacy of harm that has subjected too many of our friends, neighbors, and family members to discriminatory treatment that deprives us of our humanity and places safety out of reach. This legislation is a part of a multi-generational effort to increase transparency and accountability with support from communities most harmed by historical injustices, families who have lost loved ones to violence, and everyday New Yorkers. We stand united in support of this important reform and against the mayor's veto, and we look forward to overriding it together. And I just want to add, for those who insist on continuing the campaign of misinformation under the guise of piles and stacks and mountains of paperwork, the NYPD is the most technologically savvy police departments on the planet. If you go outside on any given day, you will see a robotic dog walking around crime fighting in the interest of all of us in the city of New York. If paperwork is the tool of implementation for this legislation, ladies and gentlemen, it will not be at the hands of the New York City Council, but at the hands of the NYPD and the administration themselves, who have the power to implement this on the hardest level or on the easiest level. And we in the council contend that it needs to be the easiest level for the NYPD to do their jobs expertly as always. It can be but a click on a smartphone. If we can have a digidog roaming the streets to help keep you and I safer, there is a smartphone for every NYPD officer that can do the same. And now it is my honor to invite Public Advocate Jamel Williams to say a few words. Council members Chris Banks and Rita Joseph have joined us also.
Peace and blessing, love and light to everybody. Thank you for coming out here. I just want to say I've worked on issues of public safety and housing with both Mayor Adams and Council Speaker Adrian Adams before they got the current titles that they have. And I just want to say I'm thankful that at least one of the partners of Adams and Adams has kept to what they said they would do when they got the power of the title. So I just want to thank so much the Speaker for really stepping up and being courageous at times when it's different, when it's difficult. The mayor in particular and the administration in general is trying to rip this city apart over a reporting bill. I want people in the media to fully understand that he's pitting people against people on a reporting bill. We haven't even got to the discussion of what the report means when we get it, which is actually a difficult conversation. He's using people's fears against them. He's using people's fears against them. So this gentleman has gotten the misinformation that a lot of other people have gotten. So I'm not even mad at him because people are afraid right now. And what we need is a mayor that won't use that fear against them, but will be courageous to tell them what we can actually do to keep people safe. So I'm thankful he's here expressing the pain of so many people in this city right now, because we all share that pain. And we all want to make sure that people are safe. And we all want to make sure when our family members pick up the phone and call law enforcement, they get a force that's transparent and accountable to do the job that they would like them to do. Now, both the Council Speaker and Mayor Adams supported this exact bill last term. The mayor told families that he supported this bill and reporting on level 1, level 2 stops. Now, when that happened, the mayor was also a former Republican police officer. And the reason I'm saying that is not just to dig, but whatever conservative knowledge he had, whatever knowledge he had of being a police officer, he had it then. So he had the ability to bring all of that information to bear and say, I still support this bill. One of the questions I hope media asks, what has changed from then to now? Because the only thing that changed in this bill is we received the minimal information from the NYPD and added it to the bill. So the only thing that's changed is there even more input from the NYPD in this final bill than there was before the mayor originally supported it. It's important. They are also using a recent horrific serial stabber as a real test case for this bill. And that is deplorable. I have family members I had to call because their neighbor was stabbed from across the street. They were horrified. This really impacts us. And to tell people that a police officer would not be able to do their job because of this bill is disgusting. And it's just not true. So I really want media to dig in to what the mayor is saying. Specifically ask whether right now, after police officers have a tour, are they supposed to tag their level 1 stops on their camera? Please ask that at the briefing. The answer is yes, according to the patrol guide. So we simply said, when you tag that at the end of your tour, just answer a couple of additional questions that are very basic, one of which the police department asked us to ask. We did say if it's easier, if this is easier for you to do after you've made a stop and you pull out your smartphone and you're walking to the car or you're waiting for the next job or you're on post, do the form the 10 to 20 second form on your phone, call it a day if that's easier. If it's not, just do it at the end of the tour like you normally do. Why would you tell officers to choose the harder way to do that? Why would you tell officers to stop an investigation? They don't do that now, and they still have information to fill out. So why would you ask them to do that after this bill is passed? Please dig into what the mayor is saying because it makes no sense. And we have also said repeatedly in our bill right now it says this is not for casual or general conversation in the bill. But I want to add this. If the mayor and administration believes that there's an overriding, superseding law or policy that overrides that, it overrides it without the bill. So whatever you define a level 1 stop to be, you have to tag that level 1 stop at the end of your tour. So whatever you think we're saying, it doesn't really matter. It's what you think a level 1 stop is. You have to tag right now at the end of the tour. When you click the button to tag, you get a couple of drop-down menus like you do with some of the level 2s. You click it, and you move on. That's it. That's all. The reason we need this reporting, though, because if we wanted to get the information, everybody would have to look at thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of body cam. You can't do that. And so we tried to find the simplest way to fit into what they're already doing to get this information. And to highlight something the speaker said, the reason this information is needed is because officers have been underreporting stops. And they are saying level 3s are level 2s and level 2s are level 1s. The reason that we can't exempt level 1 stops is because in everything now will be a level 1 stops, and we won't have the information to look at. We'll have an incomplete picture. And we want everybody, the police, the speaker, the council, the advocates, the families, the mayor, to look at a full picture of what's happening with the stops so we can all make a decision on what the next step is. But if you exempt one of those stops, we don't have a full picture, and that's not a really good way to govern. So there's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of purposeful misinformation. It is harmful to black and brown communities who feel that somebody's trying to keep them less safe. When this bill is overridden, if the mayor has decided and the administration and the PD has decided to make this as difficult as possible, as the speaker said, that's a decision the mayor and PD has made, not the council. And it's there in black and white. So I asked the media to please read it and drill the mayor on it, very specifically about what they're supposed to do right now at the end of the tours, level 1, level 2. And don't get confused by the definition of level 1. You can use their definition because they still have to tag it right now. This is the most basic common sense bill. The simplicity of this bill versus this unimaginable lies that are coming out really makes no sense. And we just asked the mayor to stop right now. And I heard him yesterday saying that he supports most of the bill except the level 1s. The level 1s are the bill. That's the bill. You have to get all of the information as simply as possible. It's the same bill you supported just a few years ago. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Public Advocate. I now invite Dr. Donald Garner, young adult pastor of the Greater Allen AME Cathedral, to come forward.
Grace and peace. My name is Reverend Dr. Donald Garner, and I serve as the young adult pastor at the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York under the dynamic leadership of Pastor Reverend Dr. Elaine Flake and Pastor Emeritus Reverend Dr. Floyd Flake. I courageously stand before you today as an ardent supporter of the How Many Stops Act. In 2010, I moved to New York City from Florida to pursue a PhD in social work from the Fordham Graduate School of Social Service, where I studied how congregations provided affirming spaces for black men returning home from prison. A major aspect of my scholarship included answering the age-old question, why have so many black and brown men been in prison? I discovered, like most scholars in my field, that draconian sentencing policies were the primary contributing factor to the systematic disappearance of black and brown men from their families and communities. On the other hand, my role as a faith and community leader has exposed me to countless stories of another extreme, unlawful and harmful encounters between police and young black boys, teenagers, and men on a daily basis that make them feel imprisoned and stripped of their value and overall humanity. Looking a black male child in the face, like I have had to do with my 13-year-old nephew, and telling him because of his very skin that he has to move differently in society, especially with police, is debilitating and heartbreaking. Listening to countless stories of black men my age who have been berated, belittled, and bashed, and even worse, offering comfort to families whose son or brother was killed at the hands of police. Even my credentials, these very credentials that you've just heard about, that I've worked so hard for, has not prevented me from having adverse encounters with law enforcement. The How Many Stops Act is a bold step towards radically providing necessary levels of transparency and accountability for all communities, especially black and brown ones who've been adversely affected, to one day have a stronger relationship with those who have sworn to protect and defend our communities with integrity. As a man of faith, I also consider myself as a hope architect. I am fueled by hope as it strengthens my fight in the face of social challenges. I still have enough humility to hope that Black and brown communities can peacefully coexist with law enforcement that does not result in harsh treatment and the loss of lives. Thank you, Speaker Adams, for this opportunity, and Godspeed to all of us to execute the critical plans ahead and related to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garner. We've also been joined by Councilmember Crystal Hudson, Councilmember Yusuf Salaam. I now invite to the podium Minister Kieron John Foy from the Ark of Justice.
Praise the Lord. No justice, no justice, no justice. What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? When do we want it? When do we want it? When do we want it? For the last 20 years or so, we in the advocacy community have been working hand in hand with people of good conscience in government to roll back the prison industrial complex here in the city of New York, to undo many of the structural and systemic mechanisms that have resulted in the over-incarceration of Black and brown people around this city. We have stood up to mayors who thought it was okay to racially profile young Black and brown people in this city to such a degree and extent that we saw numbers reaching in the millions of illegal stops. We have seen the federal government tell New York City, you are violating the constitutional rights of your very own citizens. And 2 years ago, we elected a man who promised, due to his personal and professional experience, that he would be able to rein in an abusive police department. Just trust him. That he knew enough about this department that he would be able to single-handedly undo generations of institutional and cultural racism, only to be standing before you today in 2024 to be an apologist for those same racist policies that we spent 30 years undoing. We did not elect the first Black mayor in 30 years to be an apologist for mass incarceration, to be an apologist for an abusive police department. Mr. Mayor, you no longer work for the NYPD. You now work for the people. And it's your job to stand up for our interests and not to carry their water. You can't come before the 10 million New Yorkers and profess that you represent all of us while allowing the majority of young Black and brown people in this city to continue to be consumed by policies that are not only destructive today, but will be destructive for generations to come. This isn't just about whether or not you're being productive as a police officer. This is about the signal you are sending to the handful of crooked cops out there who never stopped illegally stopping and searching us. This is a wink and a nod to crooked and racist policies that persist today under your watch, Mr. Mayor. I and this should not be any secret, did not support the mayor in his bid to become mayor. But in an effort to demonstrate good faith, I gave the brother a shot. But I can no longer stand by silently while he rebuilds an industry that has commodified black and brown people, that has destroyed generations of young people, all in the name of public safety. So, in the name of public safety, we're going to violate the constitutional rights of New Yorkers. In the name of public safety, we're going to deny them equal protection under the same law that you are sworn to uphold. Mr. Mayor, it is clear that you haven't gotten the blue out of your blood. But it also should be clear to you that we are not shrinking nor backing down. We are not going to acquiesce to misinformation. And we are not going to allow the police department to set policy in the city of New York. Those days are over. The level 1 stops that we are all here standing before you to commodify have been in the same policy handbook that you, Mr. Mayor, had to follow when you were a cop. These officers are doing the same job you were required to do by NYPD policy. This is merely a commodification of what has already been established in the policy book of the NYPD. So while we have an unnecessary conversation about level 1 stops and whether you should record them or not, you've got real criminals who are inflicting real harm, and you have no real solution for transforming their lives or the lives of the city. While we are wasting time arguing about whether or not cops should report to their employers what they do on their job, there are real threats to this city that are going unanswered. Lack of vision, perhaps. Lack of an agenda, perhaps, I don't know. But the answer is not to divide the city. The answer is not to put our children on the altar of NYPD hubris. And the answer is not lock them up. It's not stop them and throw them against the wall. The answer is not to return to the bad old days where we were just fodder for the system. We did not come this far for a black man to reverse the clock on us. And I would just like to add, I know we didn't come to talk about this specifically, but solitary confinement is a vestige of some of the most savage public policy America has ever seen. We are not savages in the city of New York. We don't treat people like savages in the city of New York. We don't lock people up like rabid animals in the city of New York. Mr. Mayor, maybe it's a failure of imagination. Maybe it's a lack of vision on how to treat people who suffer from all sorts of social ills. But I promise you this, we are not going to allow young black and brown men to be locked up in cages like dogs and forgotten about, and we're not going to allow the NYPD to take us back 30 years. You ain't the first mayor we fought, and you won't be the last we fight. But you are the one who bears the moral responsibility to stand up for young black and brown men that look like you and look like your son. We'll be praying for you. No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from Sean and Gladys Williams, the parents of Antonio Williams.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm the father of Antonio Williams, killed September 29, 2019 by the NYPD unjustly. My family has been fighting for the How Many Stops Act since day one. Antonio Williams' story was worst case scenario of what happens during a level 1 and 2 stop. The NYPD had no justification for stopping Antonio. His crime was only waiting for a cab while being black. This stop was a level 1 stop, escalated, and the murder of my son. Antonio had the right to leave. When he did, officers recklessly chased him, beat him, and murdered him in a hail of 15 bullets. When they were all so reckless, they killed a fellow officer from over 50 feet away in the dark. My son's murder started with the so-called low-level stop. So did the NYPD murder of Eric Garner. The public hears about the police killings, but many more, excuse me, but how many more times does this happen? The only person who knows is the one who's racially profiled and terrorized by the police. We only know when How Many Stops Act is amended. So it's disgusting to me how much time and resources the Mayor Adams is spending on his campaign of lies about this bill. He clearly cares more about protecting NYPD than taking steps to ensure more families doesn't have to suffer like mine. I urge the City Council to not fall prey to the mayor's lies, stand with our families, and pass this bill, override this shameful veto. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gladys Williams. I'm the stepmother of Antonio Williams. Antonio was a loving son, a brother, a father, and because of the violent actions of the NYPD anti-crime unit, Antonio's children have no father to grow up with. Nothing is going to bring Antonio back, but Sean and I have been at the forefront of this fight for the How Many Stops Act because we want his death to be led to real safety of our communities. The How Many Stops Act is not just about transparency, it's about safety. If the officers are forced to report every stop and where they're making them, it will deter them from making illegal and abusive stops. Under Mayor Adams' stop and frisk is surging, and fatal shootings by the NYPD are at the highest of its decades. Instead of holding abusive cops accountable, he is spending city resources to lobby against this bill, and it's unacceptable. My family joins 28 family members of the New Yorkers killed by the NYPD, and in supporting this How Many Stops Act. We're not saying it's the only step we need to prevent the NYPD from killing people like my son, but it's an essential one. The lack of transparency is what perpetuates the violence. We are calling on all the council members to stand with the families and override the mayor's veto. Thank you.
I now call on Rabbi Rachel Timmener, Congregation Beth Elohim.
First, I just want to say to Sean and Gladys, I'm so humbled and honored to stand with you in your courage and truly sickened about what happened to your son and devastated by your loss. My name is Rabbi Rachel Timmener. I'm the senior rabbi of Congregation Beth Elohim, and I'm here today on behalf of New York Jewish Agenda, of which I'm a founder and board member. This week, the Jewish people read in the Torah our most famous story. This very week is the week we read the words that describe Moses lifting his hand with his staff over the sea splitting, and our people walking from slavery to freedom. And this story is told in every generation, every year, again and again among our people, because out of it we are supposed to learn that wherever we live and whenever we live, we are to look in our society for who is being treated like a stranger. And how in our society, particularly if there is a history of slavery, how is that history and legacy still shaping the society? How is it affecting the people we live with in our own time? And so as Jews, there is actually no more important commandment of us. It is repeated 36 times that we are to stand against the oppression of the stranger, whoever is treated like a stranger. And so black and brown people are treated like strangers on the streets of New York. We know this. We just heard a story about it, in which they're not given the benefit of the doubt. They're not treated as if they're law-abiding citizens. They're treated as if there's something wrong when they're seen. And this bias is not just, of course, in New York. It's not just in the New York Police Department. It's in our entire society, in every structure, in every system, in all of us. And so as Jews, it is incumbent upon us to stand up for justice, because the God who split that sea is the God who stands for justice and who requires us to stand for justice. So here we are in New York, and the city council passed the How Many Stops Act, and the mayor vetoed it. And I stand with the city council to override that veto, because as a Jewish New Yorker, I stand with the God who stands for justice. I stand with the God who stands against oppression of the stranger, who stands against people being treated like strangers where they live, in our time, in our society. And I call upon all Jewish people to stand for this very simple act of transparency and accountability, so that we can rid the police department and every system of our society of racism and bias that hurts us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much, Rabbi. I now invite to the podium Council members Alexa Aviles and Crystal Hudson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councilmember Alexa Aviles, and I'm proud to stand here with faith leaders. You cannot do this work without having love for this city and love for everyone in it. What we are talking about here today is gathering information on a very persistent problem that our city and our people have struggled with over decades. Basic information that would help us do better, help us be better, help us lean into the responsibility of caring for all, of spending our resources more efficiently, more effectively. This legislation is directly grounded in community members, has come from the harms that people have experienced at the hands of unlawful policing, has come with legal experts, has come with law enforcement, has come with activists and activists. It has come from New Yorkers who have been stopped unlawfully over decades. This legislation, while simple, is deeply informed by community. Do not be gaslit. that this comes out of nowhere or that simply we are a council of women who just don't know any better. We are clear. We are focused, and we have done our homework. I hope this administration would do the same. We stand united, and we will override this veto for the safety of all New Yorkers. This is for New Yorkers, something New Yorkers have been asking for decades. And I'm proud to stand here in faith, with faith leaders, with my colleagues, with the Speaker and the public advocate, and all who support this. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Councilmember Crystal Hudson, and I do want to say that we did have one win with the passing of Introduction 538, which means that moving forward, every single consent search denial will be recorded, and we will have more information regarding attempts by police to search New Yorkers, including requesting their DNA and whether they secured proper language access support. This bill passed, I want to just note, because of the tireless work of Communities United for Police Reform, the Justice Committee, New York Civil Liberties Union, and its previous sponsor, now Borough President, who's here with us, Antonio Reynoso, and so many others who joined this coalition. As you've heard from so many already, this bill is about transparency and public safety. Racial profiling and police harassment are no less real in Level 1 encounters as they are in Level 3 encounters. For New Yorkers, the experience of being questioned by an officer is frightening and can result in violence, as happened in the case of Antonio Williams, as we just heard, who was killed waiting for a taxi in the Bronx in the escalation of a Level 1 encounter. We'll continue to fight for our convictions and fight to establish systems that overturn generations of racist policing practices that have upended the lives of thousands of Black and brown New Yorkers. This legislation will not bring back the children of Gwen Carr or Valerie Bell or Sean and Gladys Williams, but this legislation can save and protect somebody else's child in the future. I don't know how many lies it will take to attempt to hold back the How Many Stops Act. 4, 10, 100, but I say keep them coming because we will override this veto. Thank you.
Thank you so much, council members. I now invite Kermit Morris of Mother AME Zion Church, one of our legacy churches in the city of New York, to come to the podium.
Good day, all. I just want to make sure we understand the tone of what this whole thing is about. I'd like to draw upon one of those passages that we find in this book we call the Holy Bible, Hebrews. I'm looking at chapter 3, verses 13 to 16, and it reads as such. Oh my, oh my, oh my. But exhort one another every day as long as we call today, so that name or none of may be hardened in the deceitfulness of sin. For we have come partners of Christ if only we hold our first confidence firm to the end. As it is said, today you hear his voice. Do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. Now, who were they who heard yet were rebellious? I read the wrong verses, and I apologize. Here we are. And before him, no creature is hidden. But all who are naked and laid bare to the eyes of the one to whom we must render an account. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Last verse. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. This is the word of God for the people of God. All thanks be to God. And I say, as a moment, as I read this next little passage, and what about those we don't hear about? Salah. On behalf of Pastor Reverend Dr. Malcolm J. Bird and the Mother Zion Church, affectionately known as the Freedom Church, the Liberation Church, the oldest church in New York, I greet you, Mayor Adams, official members, clerics. I greet you in his holy name. My name is Kermit Tyrone Morris, Associate Minister of Mother Zion Church. Just as it has been said in our book of Hebrews, God holds everything accountable. And we hold accountable for all our actions. We are held accountable today. The clergy recognize that we have to vocalize, orate, show in support of this bill that says we hold the police accountable. This nuance is yet another point of recognizing the importance of police work. Police work holds the individuals accountable for the acts they do on behalf of the law. The law of New York City, the law of the state of New York, and the law that bounds of these in the United States. We hold sacred. These are laws that we live by, and we hold this again accountable. It's such a simple thing. It's such a simple thing that we're talking about. If you stop somebody and you know that it's going to move on to something bigger, account for it. I would like to say more. I truly would like to say more. But my words is to plead to the council to veto and push this through. Override. I'm so sorry. Override. That's so bad. It's so bad of me. We want to override this. That's where the power occurs. You have the support of the clerics, and you know you have the support of the people. You even have the support of many police officers, contrary to what you may have heard minutes ago. All right? Let's not be deceived by the imps that come in to try to dismantle what we know is true. I say these things in the truth that God sees all, knows all, and will be accountable. Everyone will be accountable for their actions.
Thank you so much. I now call up to the podium Crystal Walthall, Faith in New York.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Crystal Walthall. I'm the Executive Director of Faith in New York. Faith in New York is part of Faith in Action and Live Free. We are national networks of people of faith fighting for the liberation of our people across the country. I stand here today also as a spokesperson for the How Many Stops At Coalition. We are a coalition of hundreds of organizations, over 100 organizations, and over 28 families whose loved ones have been murdered by the police. We stand here today with one simple message. We're calling the City Council to override the mayor's veto. Now, as a person of faith, as a person who's leading an organization of people of faith around the city, I take Mayor Adams' platform of a city of faith very seriously. When we talk about being a city of faith as Faith in New York, we are talking about overthrowing the systems of oppression that are on the necks of our people. When you veto something that is as simple as asking for transparency, for stopping the people who look just like you and me, we're not talking about the same city of faith. We ain't talking about the same city. This should be no nonsense. This should be common sense. So as I'm speaking right now, I hope that we are all holding in our hearts, not only those who've been murdered by the police, but the thousands of people whose names we will never hear, who hold the trauma of being stopped day after day after day. Parents who have to train their children. What do I do? What do you do if you get stopped? Before I was an executive director, I was a New York City high school teacher. I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn. I know what it's like. I had students, 14, 15, 16 years old, coming into my classroom. Yeah, I was stopped again today, miss. What does that do to them? Trauma. Trauma. We don't have to do this. If this is the city of faith that you claim this to be, Mayor Adams, why don't you do the work of restoring the faith in this city to the people?
All right.
How do you restore faith to the people? You bring things out of the shadows.
Come on now.
You shine light.
Come on now.
Transparency is shining light. Accountability is shining light.
Preach on it. Come on. Preach on it.
That's what that does.
Preach on it.
This Intro 586 is not going to stop everything in this moment, but it will give us the data, the information. It will call on our NYPD to act differently. In the 10 years that Faith in New York has been in existence, we have stood on those city hall steps too many times for people who have been murdered by police. One too many times. We have stood on these city hall steps too many times demanding that the NYPD be transparent. We have stood on these steps too many times asking and demanding accountability, asking and demanding that our NYPD stop killing our people. No one should have to be afraid that if they send their child out, that if they themselves go out, that they're not going to make it home. And we know that level 1 offenses could potentially mean that you may not make it home. We need to stop burying our people for level 1 offenses. People who shouldn't have been stopped in the first place. As people of faith, we already know what the moral imperative is, but our own laws of the land have said that this is unconstitutional. We can't even follow the laws of the land, Mayor Adams? So, as I stand here today, again, part of the How Many Stops At Coalition, I'm asking all of us to not only keep our families and our communities in prayer, to not only stand for the justice and liberation of our people, but stand for the overriding of this veto. It is common sense. Let's stop burying our people. Let's stop traumatizing our people. And let's stand on the real side of faith in our city. Thank you.
All right. All right now.
Thank you so much. I now call to the podium our Brooklyn Deputy Borough President, Reverend Kim Council.
Thank you so much, Speaker Adams. It is my honor and privilege to serve beside the Honorable Antonio Reynoso, the borough president of the greatest borough on the planet. But I stand here not just as the deputy borough president, I stand here as Reverend Kim Council, the assistant pastor of Greater Mount Pleasant, but also as Mom Kim Council, who has a 24-year-old son and a 26-year-old daughter that I am concerned about every time they leave the house. I also stand behind this microphone and this podium as someone who has been stopped by the cops in East New York and did not think that I was going to make it home. It is unfortunate that in communities of color, courtesy, professionalism, and respect turns into cardiopulmonary resuscitation. We've got work to do. And we reject the narrative that it is either or, that we cannot have public safety and have accountability and transparency. We watched for over 42 years as black and brown kids were shipped upstate to drive the upstate economy. And we watched as Judge Shira Schindlin declared that the stop and frisk that was happening for so long was unconstitutional because it disproportionately impacted our children. And so I stand with the city council, with Speaker Adams, and with all of the city council members and everyone to say that we need to override the mayor's veto. And that as the prophet Amos cries out for justice, we are standing here crying out for transparency and accountability. We don't want to live in two different cities. We want our children to be free of trauma and harassment and make it home safely, just like everybody else. We have college-educated police officers. They are able to do what we're asking them to do. It's not too hard to do the right thing. God bless you.
Thank you so much. And just before we are closed out by our public safety chair, I'd like to call to the podium Rabbi Baruch Elman, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice.
Thank you. My name is Rabbi Bara Elman. I am with Jews for Racial and Economic Justice and also Tirdof, Jewish Clergy for Justice. I've also been working with the coalitions around the How Many Stops Act, the Right to Know, Close Rikers, a variety of initiatives that are so important to both ensuring safety in this city, but also ensuring equity. I want to just point out what's been going on here, which has not been mentioned, which is that a psychological game is being played, okay? So the psychological game is talking to people like me and trying to instill fear and make it clear that the only way we can solve that is by giving our police departments more and broader leeway to stop black and brown people in the city. Just last week, the mayor, as a guest at a bar mitzvah, pleaded during the party. I'm sure people thought they was going to stand up and get ready to dance, but instead he said to them, "You know how dangerous this city is for you. Wow. You know how dangerous it is, and that's why I want you to call your council members and tell them not to override this veto because you're not safe." He was taking advantage of fear of anti-Semitic hate crimes and using that, weaponizing that, to get people to vote against it, to ensure that this override would not happen. The other psychological war that's been going on has been going on for decades, which is to disempower black and brown people by a program of constant humiliation. Miriam Kaba includes in one of her books an essay, I Live in a Place Where Everybody Watches Me, where a young man talks about his experience going into stores and being followed by security guards everywhere, going into pharmacies and knowing that the goods are locked behind glass because he is seen as a threat. Think about the consequences of that humiliation over and over and over and over and over again, and what that does in terms of both trauma, psychological confidence, the kinds of things we need to be strong people and strong members of our community. And yet that is what our police department has been perpetuating with its unconstitutional continuation of stop and frisk policy. This means that kids coming home from school or walking to school are routinely said, "You're suspect because you don't look white. You're suspect because you're Latino." And we cannot have that. We cannot have that. I have been active, I said, in these campaigns for a very, very long time. Like Crystal, I've stood on these steps over and over and over again, and I'm so proud of this city council, this most progressive city council we have had, with its progressive caucus of Speaker Adams and of all the council members who have been responsible for getting this legislation passed, for our public advocate for introducing the legislation. We need to stop weaponizing psychological fear, stop perpetuating the degrading and humiliation of Black and brown people, and we need to override this veto and tell Mayor Adams that he needs to follow the law. And that actually, just as someone else, I think, did a slight digression to another issue, I will throw this out. Also, Mayor Adams, it is the law that Riker closes by 2027. And you cannot change that just because you don't like it, okay? So let's override this veto, and let's make sure that we have a more just and compassionate city. Thank you.
Thank you. I just really want to thank our powerful, sincere, and passionate and compassionate interfaith leaders for standing with us today to tell the truth. And now to close us out, I invite to the podium our Public Safety Chair, Councilmember Yusuf Salam.
All right. Fire.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Often I open up saying, may the peace, mercy, and blessings from the owner of all peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you. In this era of fear, I chose to open up traditionally with the language of which I come from in Arabic that I often translate in the English first, because I find that it's important that we understand what's at stake. The values that we hold, our very humanity is at stake. I'm looking at a Rubik, and on one side is this bill, trying to solve for the greater good all things that allow us to pursue a great life. On the other side are things like education. And we know, and I found out in prison, that they are basing how many jails to build by the time our children are in the 3rd and 4th grade. So now when we fast forward into this 24-karat year, what's at stake is what we have unwittingly been participating in, and oftentimes we have no participation at all. We didn't choose the color of our skin, but we are being judged by it and not the content of our character. I've been stopped many times. Y'all know I was stopped as a member of the formerly known Central Park 5. But I was stopped after I came home from prison. Rushing to an event, I swore the light was green, and then it was yellow, and y'all know the rest. But because I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I would echo that most, if not all, New Yorkers in particular want to be law-abiding citizens. And when the officer told me to pull over, I pulled over. License and registration, yes, sir. Got my registration and patted all of my pockets because I swore I left my house with my license. And I said, I don't have my license on me. The officer said, well, that's fine. Do you have somebody to go home and get your license for you? And I said, unfortunately, I don't. They then told me that they would have to arrest me because they didn't know whether I was driving illegally. And then somehow, somewhere, the bright idea came into my head that I was going to say, hold on, I can tell you, I can prove who I am. I said, you remember the Central Park jogger case? Both officers backed up. One officer said, you're not going to call Al Sharpton or Farrakhan on us. And I said, no, I really do have a license. It's just, you know, this is one of those unfortunate situations. The officer told me that he had to give me a ticket, and the strangest thing happened. And I'm happy to say this, because we're talking about building relationships that are stronger with our police, the same people that our mayor called guardians of society. The officer told me, fight the ticket. Never heard that before in my life. So, came time for me to fight it. I fought the ticket. And when I went into the courthouse, the judge called the case. He looked at the summons, looked up at the officer, looked back down at the summons. I'm waiting for my turn to, I don't know what, plead my case. And the judge asked the officer, is this what happened? The officer said yes. Before I could even blink my eye, the judge said, case dismissed. Now, I was afraid. I got to be honest. You know, the officer looked very angry at that moment. He did not have my complexion, so I was even more afraid. And back then, Pathmark was right across the street, where we're hoping to have the 2nd Avenue train line come up 125th Street from 2nd Avenue on that side. So I was at the DMV right there, and I waited for a moment. I waited a little bit more. Then finally I said, maybe it's safe for me to go out. And as I exited the courtroom, that officer was standing there. I tried to walk past, and he blocked my way. He held out his hand in front of me, and we shook hands, and I was shocked. And the officer said to me, I didn't have anything to do with your arrest so many years ago, but this is my way of apologizing for our police. And I was so thankful for that, because it restored my faith in what I had begun to call the criminal system of injustice. You see, transparency allows for us, well, matter of fact, let me just stop for a moment. The question really should be, what are we trying to hide? Because if we do the knowledge and understand that 1 + 1 is 2, then it means that if in the guidebook, in the manual that the police officers are supposed to use in their day-to-day, if they're being told by our mayor, this is going to cause them too much work. This is a part of the process of what they're supposed to be doing anyway. So when I was stopped, and that was a good stop, I shared with my, I'm trying to figure out how to strategically bring forth, and maybe I'll share with you all as well, something that happened to me while I was campaigning for city council. I was stopped. Wasn't disobeying the traffic laws. As a matter of fact, an article had just been written about me and how I obeyed all of the laws of our city. And my wife was in the car with me and one of our children. This might be considered maybe a level 1, maybe a level 2, I'm not sure. But when I was stopped, my wife was very upset because she knew that we had done nothing wrong. And she said to the officers, "Which precinct are you from?" They said what precinct they were from. And then she said, "Why did you stop us?" They said, "These cars have been getting away from us." They didn't say, "You were speeding." They didn't say, "You've been getting away from us." They said, "These cars, I looked like I was of the criminal element." And I said, "Well, I just want y'all to know I'm going to be the future councilman for this district." And so it's helpful, I think, when we think about what is being shielded from us. Because if everybody wants to be law-abiding citizens, I think New York really should be the green Mecca that it could be, where we eliminate crime altogether. But it starts here. It starts with us seeing what the data is in order for us to chart a path forward with all of the information so that the communication between all agencies allows for the greater good to happen. And so I'm proud, I am honored, in fact, I'm thankful to be standing not only with this particular city council, under this amazing speaker, but also with these great members of the clergy. I am so honored and thankful to be standing here as a person who was run over by the spike wheels of justice, because I know what it's like to be in pain. And we represent those who have been in pain. And we've often said, those who've been in pain should have a seat at the table. And I've been granted that. And that's a sacred trust. So as the chair of public safety, I'm honored to be here in support of the override that will happen.
Right now.
And my why is for the greater good. Thank you.
This concludes our press conference.
And with that, we'll take on-topic questions on the how many stacks. Keep it to one question for all the members of the media to get opportunity. Garner, we'll start with you.
Council Speaker, given the mayor's rhetoric on all this recently, the vetoes, if you get the override you're anticipating on how many stops, do you anticipate that the NYPD will actually abide by what's in place? I mean, conceivably, when filling out whatever form they create to do this, I mean, they could put not applicable for everything. I mean, there are ways, and, based on what the mayor's saying, I'm not sure how you'd interpret it, but some would say, his rhetoric is essentially encouraging that type of behavior. So, I mean, what do you anticipate, given, assuming you get an override, how this plays out on the practical level?
I appreciate the question very much. Thank you. First of all, I will just say that any attempt to dishonor the law is reprehensible. We expect for this law to be complied with to the fullest extent. The second thing that I'll say also is that I don't think that it's been brought out as much that the implementation of this law is not required tomorrow, next month, next week. We have until September. I believe that's many, many months down the road for the NYPD, the administration, to act on the way that the implementation of this law will happen. So, and that is what we are depending on. We are depending on really NYPD to be the heroes in this case. Yes, the law passed, but look how simple we're going to make this for our police department. It is not going to be the end-all, be-all of mountains of paperwork. That is not true. Look how simple we're making this for our force, the greatest force on the planet.
Jeff? Speaker, I'm wondering, the mayor
That is a fantastic question. I'm so glad we're talking about transparency. Let's talk about transparency in the way that this bill came to be. And I think that the public advocate can probably give a lot of input with this also. This bill and the crafting of this bill was done so with the input of the NYPD. I will give it to the public advocate to fill you in.
We tried every attempt to continue to engage the NYPD and the administration as a whole. They gave minimal input. That input that they gave, we put into the bill. So there's an additional question that the NYPD asked us to ask. They also told us they were concerned that not only would it be level stops, it'd be every interaction if an officer has it. So we said we'll make that clear, and so we put into the bill very clearly, this does not include casual or general conversation. And every time we tried to move forward, the only other negotiations, we're not going to have level ones. And as I mentioned before, that is the bill. That if you gut that, then you gut the bill, and there's really no point to have that. And so what I said is, if you can just tell us the easiest way to implement that, and we'll try to craft it this way, because there's certain things the council can't do in terms of telling them what to do, but we can try to give some better guidelines. What's the easiest way to do that? And there would be no engagement. And we heard some of the similar things and misinformation that we're hearing now, and I understand that the mayor is continuing that even as we speak. Just continued misinformation just simply is not true. And now I would even say, you define level one, what you think level one is, but you still have to follow the patrol guide. And the patrol guide, not the city council, not me, not this bill, says you currently have to tag level ones. Even if you're looking for a missing child, even if you're doing all these things, the patrol guide says you have to tag level ones. So what we did in thinking, how can we do this easier, is told them, when you're doing the missing child example, don't fill out all of those forms. Create what we said, a mass question form, so you can just fill out one form, because we're not asking for names or addresses anyway. So just fill out one form that says you stopped 20 people and the demographics. This is a simple way to do it. They will not engage with us in how to do this as simple as possible. They want to put out the misinformation, because that works better when it comes to scaring people. And I also want to be clear, they are correct that there are different things that people can do when it comes to different levels, like level one, you can walk away. Stops are indistinguishable to New Yorkers as a whole. They have no idea what a level 1, 2, 3, 4 stop is. They have no idea whether they can leave or not for most people. So what we're just asking is get some more information so we all can look at it and help guide what the best way is to move forward. That we're not using anecdotal information, we're not using what the PD thinks, we're not using what advocates think, we're actually looking on what it is that they report.
No. Let's go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good job. So good. Good to see you. Thank you for being here and your words. So powerful. Where's